Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the BG Show. We are here to do an episode 1 and 2 spoiler reaction, in-depth deep dive to House of the Dragon. I am here with my college roommate and good friend, Adam Rubenstein. He is a book reader and probably the biggest Game of Thrones fan I know, and probably anyone watching this will know. So let's get right into it. Let's talk about the show. We'll give our opinions. You're going to get both. The good thing about this review is you're going to get my perspective, which I would say kind of more than casual, but not diehard, probably like somewhere in that range. I've seen all 8 seasons of Game of Thrones. I've seen both of episodes, so I'm locked in. And Adam has obviously seen all the TV stuff, but he's also read the books more than one time, so he can kind of tell you. We won't spoil anything on the book ending. I don't know how the story ends. He obviously knows how the story ends, so we have different perspectives. So let's get right into it. I'm gonna, like on this channel, like I said, I always try to be authentic. That's why I'm not doing this review on my own, because quite frankly, I don't know enough about the lore for the review to be interesting. So that's why I have Adam here. We're sorry for not getting episode 1 up in time. We had some technical difficulties, but we're going to actually fuck it. No one cares about that. Let's just get right into it. We're gonna be covering all the episodes from now through episode, what is it, 8 episodes?
10,
Nine? 8 episodes?
10.
10
Well,
episodes.
10 in total.
10 total, right? 8 more. So if you like this review, come back, subscribe. We'll be doing this for every episode. We'll be recording right after. We'll have it up Sunday night. So let's get into it. So you hear the show House of the Dragon is coming out after Game of Thrones. What is your initial reaction? Were you scared? Were you excited? Like, what was your reaction to the show being announced?
My first thought was who's doing it because I don't want to spend too much time on D&D, how badly they botched it, and how much of George was going to be involved. And once we knew George's involvement, who was doing it, I think after 2 episodes, I'm willing to give you know, check mark of approval. Looks like they're staying to their roots, their core, what they know, what's going on, how to progress the story, how to plant it. I think my initial reaction first, Damon, in my opinion, is a top 3 character in the entire world of Ice and Fire. So, like, for me personally, like, this is the guy you want to see, except with the exception of one other person who you may or may not see. One you've already seen, that's Tyrion, and book Tyrion and show Tyrion completely different. So I was very happy. So far, they've met all my expectations. What do you think as a non book reader, seeing that crappy ending into what you've seen so far?
Yeah, so I always try to compare it from an IP. I think it has a lot of similarities to other famous IP. So the most famous example I think of like the book movie split is Harry Potter. Because when the Harry Potter movies came out, I would say like half the audience had read the books, half the audience hadn't read the books. So you actually had people doing like drive-by spoilers. Like they would go to the theater, they would drive by, yell out a spoiler like Dumbledore died or some like bullshit like that. So I think that's really the last time we've seen kind of like a fandom that was split like this between book readers and non-book readers. And it's even more dangerous now because of Twitter. Um, but I'm definitely more excited through 2 episodes than I was going into the show for sure. Let's say excitement level, I was probably at like a 6.5 going into the show, and now I'm probably at like an 8.5. So, and the thing with it
Fair.
has such, the $1 million question is, I mean, you're going to care as a book reader, you care. The question is HBO going to get people like me and more casual fans to care about these characters, knowing that, like, we know where the Targaryen family at least ends, even if,
Well, just to cut you off, they already just came out like 15 minutes before we hopped on here that the first episode of last week premiered 10 million. Okay, this week 10.2. So they're already going crazy.
that's
So
good, yeah.
it's going to go fast. It's going to keep building. They're going to have a little bit of time and, trust building. They have to get back to the fandom, which they're I think they're going to do. They picked the right story, and so far they're doing the right thing about the story.
And we won't talk about Lord of the Rings this episode, we'll talk about it on the channel, but I think them coming out with the show before Lord of the Rings was a big, big W because they really still, I mean, at the end of the day, they'd be judged whether the show is good or not. But I think just getting in the door first uh, really gives them a leg up because now people are going to be comparing, Lord of the Rings to this show instead of vice versa. So let's get right into the episode. Episode 1 we'll do really quickly because I thought episode 2 was a stronger episode. So we'll do more of that one. But episode
Agreed.
one, I thought was good. It definitely takes at least me a little bit to like get adjusted to the dialogue and the accents again, figure out what the hell people are talking about. I was a little bit worried after episode one because I quite frankly had no idea. Like watching Game of Thrones episode one, I thought was easier to tell who was related to who. Like you knew who Ned Stark was, you knew who his sons were. Okay, Jon Snow's the bastard. Okay, those are his daughters. This is, I thought, was way more confusing. I mean, um,
Game of Thrones and that story is very character driven. This one is very, very plot driven.
yeah.
And they kind of threw you into the world very quickly. And there was no going here. Because if you remember in Game of Thrones episode one, the first thing you see is you're north of the wall. Then they bring you back in and you go to Winterfell, you meet the Starks. Then next thing you know, you're in King's Landing. So you're kind of going all over the place. They're introducing each family. I agree. Introducing everybody was definitely the toughest point as a book reader, especially on the small council. I didn't think they did a good job first episode at introducing Lord Strong and Lord Beesbury, but overall, I'm not going to cut them too deep on
So
that one, which brings
also,
me
yeah, I was gonna say another question is so as a book reader, you're reading these books and you have all these images in your head, right? Of what these characters look like. When you see them on screen, like this, we'll start with the king. Is you think he's a good visual representation? Who do you think? I'm going to assume Damon. You think is the best visual representation right now of a character?
no. In the
No.
books, the ages are very, very different in the books. In the books, Viserys is 28, Daemon is 24. So they
Oh,
have to
really? Oh,
play.
so that's a big change.
Rhaenyra is much younger too. Alicent's about the same age in the books at this point.
Oh, so
They
28 and 24 is a big difference between brothers between the age gap now. That's a much bigger
correct.
rivalry, 28 and 24.
Yes. And I understand for show reasons why they don't want to have a bunch of 7-year-olds, you know, fighting it out in the streets and whatnot, if that's what all the kids really are. So I can understand that to a degree, but they do change the ages and they changed a lot of things just in terms of the book and the lore. The fans, the hardcore fans, one of the big things that they had an uproar for is they did change the colors of the Valerians. They made them black, which by my definition is fine. You want to go for it, go for it. In the book, they are definitely not that. Even part of George and their team, they asked them to change Kristen Cole to black. So they did make big changes in this
Are
regard.
there any black characters in this story, like in the book, or do they not even say?
No, they do exist in the book and everything. Like you did see them a little bit in Game of Thrones. And, they did say make Kristen Cole black, make a couple other houses black. The reason why they didn't, I guess they petitioned it more or less, is because the Valerians are essentially kin to the Targaryens. So it was kind of funny, episode two, when Lena says, pure blood of the Valerians, or of Valerians, excuse me. And, it's clearly a little bit of a mixed race at that point. It's so the real hardcore fans they kind of rough it up for, but it's just good television. Corlys Valerian is a hell of a fucking character, and the actor playing him, Steve Toussaint, has been doing a very good job. So hats off to him.
Yeah.
The main thing I do want to just keep on about the books and just with episode one in particular is Emma. That labor scene is very different in the book, and I don't want to spend too much time on it. Is the book the Dance of the Dragons is basically known from three sources: a septon, a court, and the full dwarf, who's the fool, and the Grand Maester. And I want to get into all of it. And that particular part, Emma and that childbirth, all we know at that point is she gave birth and the child died. So seeing a C-section, a medieval C-section, blew my mind as a book reader
Mm.
because a lot of the stuff, and especially the stuff that's written down from the maesters, are lies. So you can kind of pull the truth together from the three different sources and a little bit of from the outside of like, all right, this part's true, this part's true, but the maesters are known to lie, and that's who's writing this book. So you have to understand they're trying to make themselves look good. So that whole season, I definitely like that's a George thing that I believe came from George. Like unbelievable. And they did it with the tourney scene. She's giving her life, they're taking life. It's a beautiful metaphor at the same time. And poor Emma Aaron. She had a hell of a three scenes. Hats off to her. But uh it did it wasn't necessary, I guess, to get that out of the way. It definitely was a nice curveball for book readers and non-book readers because I know I was not expecting that.
Yeah. And something that I think a lot of the Game of Thrones, I think there's some crossover between like nerds and Game of Thrones audiences, but there probably isn't that much. And I just want to say, to the people who watch Game of Thrones but don't really probably watch Star Wars or Marvel or the more nerdy stuff that I cover, don't take for granted how good the costumes and the sets and the CGI is because all of
Oh,
that stuff is 10 out of 10. And Marvel is shitting the bed so hard right now with She-Hulk CGI, and the dragons look really, really good. And I think that's like I remember when the show was first announced, that's what everyone was talking about. At least in casual circles, they're like, "I hope the dragons look good. I hope the dragons look good," and they look real. I think they even look better this episode than last episode.
so
So yeah,
George asked for three main things to be done on this show, and one of them was dragons, and he wanted the dragons to really stand out and be distinct because in the books they really do have a distinct look, and everything about them is different. And so far, between the two we've seen, Caraxes, Damon's, and Cyrax, Rhaenyra's, clearly different. Caraxes is red. He's known as the bloodworm. He kind of looks like a worm. You saw that shot of him. He looked thin with the wings in red. Perfect Cyrax. He had that yellowish gold tint. And from what we've seen of the other dragons in the trailer, they look like who they are written down to be. And the other two things that he asked is more heraldry, which you definitely saw. Damon's armor. You saw how much better his armor was than everybody else. Remember, this is the prince. He's not supposed to look like a peasant. Kristen Cole, like his armor was very blank, very bland, nothing special to it. Hightower, his armor was okay. Damon, another level. So look out for these details. Like the dresses, completely insane. The Red Keep, the first episode, you're seeing it all live, bright, colorful with people. That's really what the world is supposed to look like. And then the third thing is, and it's very minor, but you could tell for a book person, it's a very big deal. In Game of Thrones, the conversation between Aemon and Jon at the wall when Aemon is telling Jon who he is, Aemon Targaryen. He tells him about his brother, Egg, who was a king, and then he skips a generation to Aerys, Dany's father. George wanted them to write that wrong. I don't know when it's coming. It's a very minor thing, but he skipped the generation. So eventually we're going to hear about Jaehaerys II, who was the son of Aegon V, who is father of Aerys II. Those were the three things that George really wanted to have fixed. And the dragons so far, check mark. The heraldry, check mark. And I'm sure this minor little thing is going to be brought in conversation in some way, shape, or form somehow down the line in another show. Like it's got to come up because he brought it up in this meeting with HBO and they approved it.
yeah. I think the only like we spoke about, we were texting. The only issue I have a little bit, it's not a big deal, was just the wigs. I think I'm used to them already, but they look a little bit like they're not terrible, but they look a little bit like founding fathers wigs. Also, I think Matt Smith pulls it off, and surprisingly, what's the black guy's name?
Corliss.
He pulls it off better than the King does. I think the King's
Uh,
is the worst one. I don't know if it's just his face. Maybe it's just his face doesn't fit it. It's not terrible, but it was like a minor nitpick. But that was really the only thing.
I'm not going to nitpick about the wigs. They could have been a little bit
Yeah.
better. Rhaenyra's was good. Emma was good, even though for the three scenes she had. Lena in episode 2, she literally had a Mozart wig on. I felt bad for her, but just not the best. But so far, so good on that. And episode 1, like I said, it was good. The only other thing that I personally think they could have done a better job, especially because of who Damon is, when they brought him in and he was coming in and he was smashing up all those bad people. He was establishing order of the gold cloaks, making them protect. Picture it like the police. Those were people that were thieves, rapists, not good people. They made it seem like he was just going on like a bloodlust, which he sort of did, but he was doing it to the right people. He wasn't doing it to innocent people. So
Right.
they did that well. And the other key thing is you can tell between Rhaenyra and Daemon that there's a certain mutual fondness between them and mutual respect. And you saw that especially with episode 2, because when they came to that bridge and Otto Hightower came there, Damon wasn't going to back down to Otto Hightower. I can assure you that.
Yeah.
That whole sequence was very different in the book. It doesn't even go down like that. It potentially could have. Remember, the Maesters do lie. And, and back to your point of the CGI, when you saw the clouds moving,
Oh, that was the
you
peak
knew
CGI. Yeah.
you knew a dragon was coming, and the fact that it
They look
was,
better in motion than they do when they're standing still, I think.
oh, it looked amazing.
But
And you
yeah.
that felt that felt like when you read the books, when it's like a POV chapter and you're standing on a bridge and it's like you're looking out and like boom, like that's the kind of world you expect. They really did it, and you can tell they're planting the seeds. I think the storyline really picked up in episode 2 with obviously the king picking his wife, and I think you got a real sense of Rhaenyra this episode. They really gave her some more personality when she was, you know, first she said in the king council in the small council meeting, we have dragon riders, referring to the stepstones, and Otto Hightower and the king, and everyone was like, whoa, we're not ready to just smoke these guys. Corlys was happy, and for obvious reasons, without getting too deep into it, but the Valerian fleet, and he did mention it, it is the biggest, most important fleet in Westeros at this point. It is rivaled by the Greyjoys, but Valerian definitely is number one in town at the moment when it comes to fleet and naval skills. And those trade routes are very important. He's not really joking around. But the very big key thing, like the access between the narrow sea and the stepstones laying there, is a big thing. And I get it in his point of view. It is his own men in his own ship, so he's obviously going to care a little bit more. But you saw like she's not stupid. She saw that, and she's got a little bit of let's just go kill them like Tywin. Like I'll just burn them down. And
Yeah.
Viserys, and in the book they did this. They said that he's a very peaceful king, and they're doing a good job with that. Like he is, and he laid it down very quickly. He's like, I'm not risking war for this. And George paints a very great picture of like what makes a good king. And it's very easy for Corlys to say he's eating there with his feast and balls and everything, but all the people in the realm are eating and feasting and balling and they're having a great time. So it's very hard. That's why Rhaenyra when Viserys tells her about how dangerous that seat is, everyone is gunning for that seat because of the power they hold and what they can change to make their lives better. Never mind the whole White Walker sequence that comes with it that obviously no one really knows about, but the Targs at this point, apparently.
Yeah. So we're kind of bouncing around. I'll think of a structure next week, I guess, but we try to just keep it kind of like a natural conversation. I'm trying to think of other questions. So Rhaenyra, that's the princess, right? Rhaenyra.
Correct.
So do you think the way she's portrayed, is that book accurate, or do you think that's them trying to kind of they know that they have kind of messed up Danny. Well, not messed up. A lot of people didn't like how she ended, and she was a huge fan favorite. And because she looks very similar, I know that's probably like the books, but do you think they're going a little bit overboard trying to make her like a lot like Danny to try and get the fans back in, or do you think it's like a natural thing?
Well, fun fact for the people watching the BG show. I don't want to. I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say this, but Danny and Damon essentially is Danny's sixth great grandfather. So they are blood related. All these people, you got to remember that. So their thinking mentality, and you heard this even in Game of Thrones. Every time a Targaryen is born, the gods flip a coin to see if he's mad or not. And Danny went a little mad at the end, apparently.
Yeah.
Rhaenyra, you got to remember in the book, everyone is definitely younger in the book, and they sped it up very quickly in 2 episodes. You have to understand, in 2 episodes, they went about 13 and a half years. So
I
that's a
think they were.
lot.
I read there was 6 months between episodes 1 and 2.
So episode 1, the opening scene starts with the Great Council. That's 101. And Viserys' reign starts 103. And then it goes 9 years after that. So you're already at 112.
Oh
And
yeah.
then episode 2, 6 months after. So I don't remember exactly
He's
where
been king
112
for
we're
like
at,
10 years now.
more or less, I believe.
Is that considered a
Uh,
long time in Game of Thrones?
well, you got
Without
to
dying?
remember. Well, you got to well, see, very interesting from your perspective. It there's only been a couple kings at this point, so there's only been
Right.
Aegon, well, no, no, it's way. See, we're way, way before that. There's only been Aegon, his son, Aenys. Then there's a little sabbatical with Maegor. I'm a Maegor fan, so I'm going to give him Maegor. Then you have Jaharis, and that's who you saw at the old council. And he ruled for about, like, I believe 60 years, the longest
Uh,
ruler of all the
yeah.
Tard kings. So, you only had three kings, really, three, four kings. So it's very hard to say. In terms of the history of what we know, he did rule for an okay time, and his reign was pretty peaceful and prosperous, for the most part. You can tell with that character, like, he cares about not going to war, he cares about doing what the best thing is. We have to see what his character obviously does do when these, things do collide, because we saw it in the trailer, we did see it in this episode. They are going to the Stepstones. So fucking battle is coming, and battle does cost money. So, he is prepared to get his hands bloody. And they did a really nice job in that in episode 2 and the trailer, setting up the Stepstones. And I think when they get to that, it's really going to start to set apart the difference between, is this guy just a complete maniacal, crazy, batshit, dickhead, or is he just kind of twisted guy that does bad things to bad people because he's doing the good thing at the end of the day in his view. And I think that's really what you're going to get a lot of in the story is, what is the right thing, and do you agree with what they're doing because they believe what they're doing is the right thing. See, being where I know where it goes, that's going to be a very continuous question for people. Like, and you can already get that. And I'm going to ask you this in 2 episodes. Like, what do you think of Otto Hightower? The first thing you think about, all right, he's honorable guy. You think of Tywin as a hand. He's kind of quiet, not maybe as, I'm going to come and destroy your entire castle. And middle at the end of the episode, he's like, go comfort the king.
Yeah, you like kind of all the characters until they start giving away their daughters.
Well,
And then you're like,
true. I
kind of fuck this guy. But um I think the most normal guy right now you probably think is the king, ironically.
um
Well, at least
I,
he hasn't done anything scummy yet, I should say. Not yet, at least.
well, in my view, none of them really have, truthfully.
Yeah, I guess
uh
in the context of the story.
yeah, I mean, because when Damon said, he's like, I'm in traditional Valyrian, way, I'm putting an egg in the cradle and taking another wife. Like, in traditional Valyria, like, okay, he's allowed to do that. I mean, you know, it's not his law-abiding wife by
She was
Westerosi standards.
she was pregnant in the book, right? During that scene. They
Yeah, so
changed
they
that.
definitely changed her character up. In the book, she's a typical Valyrian looking like woman. She's from Lys. Lys is like tons of like blonde, blue eyed. Some are like purple eyed. Looking like they changed her character. She does have a bigger part to play. So far, the actress who's doing her, I love her accent. She was great last night. So hats off to her. She's doing a great job with, she's got a terrific, terrific, terrific character ahead of her for however big or small they expand on her role. So I'm excited to see what they do with her, because I know a lot of people, when episode 1 ended, they didn't realize, because they said, they told Damon, go to your wife. And then they saw her. They're like, is he crazy? He's going to bring his girlfriend with him to his wife. And no, he finds up going to Dragonstone. So, in the books, he does get her pregnant. Um, I can go into it a little bit more, entirely up to you, being that they didn't take that storyline, but that's, more minutes if you really want it.
Let's let me think. So we might be running up until the Zoom limit here. But I think I'm trying to think. I think the best part of the show for me is right now is also I don't know where it's going. I mean, obviously everyone is on the table to die. I have some like predictions who's going to kill who. I mean, obviously you assume
Well,
like
before I want to hear those, before we get that, the two things I want to just cut you off, and I apologize, is in episode 1, and you have to understand, when they saw Kristen Cole and Allison was like, ooh, he's Dornish. Dorne is not part of the realm at the current moment. So remember that. So even though it's the Seven Kingdoms, Dorne is not part of the kingdom at this point.
interesting.
So yeah. And
So
I
uh
do think I do think we may have potential and this is pure speculation, that egg Damon was holding, it may have potentially have been Drogon. So there's a big theory that Danny's eggs come from Dreamfire, and they said that egg was Dreamfire's. Could not be. Just saying.
Interesting. So I think we covered everything. Trying to think what other angles, what other questions people would have. I mean,
Well,
yeah, if you've
who do you think is going to survive and kill who at this point?
well, I
And
guess okay,
mind
so
you, there are
my last
mind you
question
there.
is so don't spoil anything, obviously, but these books end way before Game of Thrones starts, right? It doesn't lead all the way up into Game of Thrones. There's a time gap.
This particular story ends way before Game of
Game of
Thrones.
Thrones starts. Do you have a so I'm saying is, HBO, I mean any studio stretches content like, Star Wars is coming out with all these shows and they're like finding gaps in the stories to have all these like Mando. That was completely made up. They were just like, "Oh, let's make a show right after Return of the Jedi." Are you scared that HBO when this because that these seasons are going to be really successful that they're going to literally make shows all the way up until Danny, like just fill the entire gap?
Well, the Jon Snow show does give me a little bit of pause because that's pure fan fiction. Like that is not George material. So depending on what George's involvement is, that could be either terrific or it could be garbage. Who
It's
knows?
it's interesting though. Sorry, not to cut you off, but like because with this show like when you leave Game of Thrones, it's still like a Stark story, but by adding,
Yeah.
but by adding,
See,
it was close. It was 50-50. But by adding a Targaryen prequel and Jon Snow's Targaryen sequel, it's now officially like a Targaryen. I feel like story all the way through now,
well,
right? More than
to,
Stark.
well, to make it very fair, A Song of Ice and Fire, the novels which Game of Thrones is on, is not finished yet. And if you
Yeah.
really do think about it, other than Danny, it is a story about the Stark children and other characters. So you do get that feeling. But you got to remember that whole world, that whole history, that whole culture. And unless you read the books and everything, it is so embedded in Targaryen and Valyria and Targaryen history of what they were doing. So when it's very natural for me as a book reader. And you got to remember this whole stuff. And George has a second volume of Fire and Blood to finish. He has 100 this show is 100. The first season George already said is 101 to 129. The dance is essentially 129 to 131. So you're only talking about 2 years of history. So this shit is very fucking action packed. We're about to get into like picture like peak season 4, but for like 2-3 seasons. Like that is what's coming at us. So depending on what they want to do, and again, I don't know. I don't make these decisions. I wish I did to some degree. They can go straight 100 years beforehand. They can go right after and do afterwards. They can go completely elsewhere. There are talks about HBO doing a show in regards to Nymeria, who that might name sound a bell from Arya's direwolf, but she in George's world, she's a real woman. She came from Essos and she basically landed in Dorne with 10,000 ships. That is in apparently development, and that is written down a little bit by George, not totally so. That's going to be a lot of quote unquote fan fiction, if you will. So they have tons of content and tons of IP. They can go forward, they can go back. Like the World of Ice and Fire, the encyclopedia that he written with Elio and Linda, mostly them, and this kind of goes back into Fire and Blood, is a whole world and universe. Like they have so much stuff they could do if they want. They can go back thousands of years. They can go back, 100 years later. Me personally, after how the show goes, I would like to either see Dunk and Egg, but I would like to see George do more stories on that, get more of those novels out, or Blackfire Rebellion. And that's just mostly because my top three characters, I said it before, Bloodraven, Daemon, Tyrion, and Bloodraven is be right in the midst of Blackfire Rebellion, and that would make an unbelievable story, and it would feel very Game of Thrones esque because it's very character and very plot driven because there's a lot of stuff going on there, and there's a lot going on here, but it's just so action packed, and it really is the quote unquote Targaryen civil war. So I think they picked a great piece of story, if you will, to kind of get the fans back because HBO, they had $1 billion on the line with this IP. They couldn't afford to not have an action packed good show. So they picked the right one. Damon, I think everyone will enjoy Damon
Well,
or hate Damon. I think everyone will love and enjoy all the characters to a degree.
I think if this show is a hit and it's really good,
It's already been
we
picked
got
up for
8 minutes
season
left.
two.
Yeah, I mean, if this show is good and, hitting the way it is, like, just give whatever sequel show you do, just give these creators the show.
See, I the only thing though that I would want them to do, and again, it's already been slightly changed to a degree if they go post rather than pre. I
Oh, wait.
personally,
Yeah. Yeah, finish. Sorry.
at this point, give me Aegon's conquest, and then just work your way from there. Go from Aegon to his kids, Jaharis, House of the Dragon, and then
And how
all the
about
way
this?
through.
How about this? And everyone's talking about, like you said, pre or post. What if we just like somehow got more stories within the Game of Thrones seasons 1 to 8? What if you got like the Hound, right? Got the actor who played the Hound, and you did like, HBO loves miniseries. You did like a 6 episode miniseries of the Hound. And it's like you say this adventure took place when he was off camera, right, on Thrones. And you kind of like add little bits of stories or maybe supplement Game of Thrones that way.
See, that'd be very interesting. And the thing with Game of Thrones, and we could do a show episode on this, and it is worth it to a degree. They changed the books so fucking much, and they changed the Hound, I guess, in his little comeback little thing so much. But that particular miniseries would work because they didn't change him enough, and you didn't hear about him enough to really figure it out.
All these
Where
side
he
characters,
would
though.
he would he would be perfectly okay. You know, if
You
they
can get
stuck,
Pedro Pascal to do like
they can.
5 episodes before he gets killed because we don't know what he does. Like, you know what I mean? Like in Dorne, 4 or 5 episodes before he comes for that tour. I don't who the hell knows.
No, we as a book reader,
Uh,
that wouldn't be good. The Hound, you can do. It depends on how much they'd be willing to bend, quote unquote, Game of Thrones to go the real route, because George lobbied for 12 seasons. He wanted 10 minimum. He lost that battle, obviously. He only got 8. And you saw what happened. And we know as a Game of Thrones viewer you see, it doesn't take an episode to get from King's Landing to Winterfell. It takes, 6, 7 episodes. So it was just rushed too fast. They just wanted to finish it. They didn't care at that point, but they learned from their mistakes from what we can see. And really excited to see how they go forward, how they bring it all together and watch the seeds plant. And I'm sure George is very, very excited in how it's going so far. And I'm sure all the fans, for the most part, are enjoying it. And all the people who haven't seen Thrones for whatever reason or haven't read the books, they're definitely enjoying it. And they feel like, all right, this isn't going to be crap. I'm not going to waste my time and invest in and get crap. You feel like you're getting a quality, hell of a quote unquote water cooler show. We haven't had a Sunday night, 9 p.m. be there, not watch it, be square show in years. So it's nice to have that feeling again.
yeah. All right, guys. I think that just about wraps up our review. If you've made it this far the whole way, thanks a lot for supporting us. Next week, I think the plan is for us to watch in person at your place. So maybe I'll even record a watch along. Who knows? Maybe we'll test that out. We'll record ourselves watching the episode. We'll definitely do a review. But we got you guys for the next, these two, the next 8 episodes will be here, and then we'll do probably like a big, rapid review of the entire series. Thanks again for watching the BG show. I'm BG, like always. This is Adam Rubenstein. He'll be back a lot. Thanks again for watching, guys, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye, guys.